A guy ends up waking up in a place he doesn't recognize at all, wondering how he got dumped in the middle of nowhere. Out of the blue, a floating screen pops up in front of him, and he's completely thrown off. It hits him that maybe he's been reborn as a goblin or something weird like that. Then it clicks, this whole setup feels way too familiar. Turns out he's inside Fantasy Frontier, a top-tier RPG game that he used to be obsessed with. The graphics were wild, the story was deep, and it had the highest ratings for any role-playing game. He remembers dozing off while playing it. And now here he is. That screen in front of him confirms it. He's literally a goblin now. Right after, another screen shows up, talking about some kind of memory syncing. He's got no clue what that means until memories that aren't his start flooding in. He gets a front row seat to the tough life this goblin boy had lived before he showed up. Then, a voice calls out his sister Lily, telling him to hurry or he'll be late. He pulls himself together and they head out. Lily hands him a lunchbox as they walk. The path and the surroundings start to look more and more familiar. It's definitely the game world. From those new memories, he figures out that both he and Lily are orphans barely getting by. They're heading to the mansion of some jerk of an employer who basically treats them like dirt. On the way, Lily trips, but he catches her and quietly promises to keep her safe. He's dealing with a lot. He's now a goblin, which is basically the weakest kind of demon there is. Still, he decides he's going to survive somehow and make sure Lily's okay. When they reach the mansion, he gets to work, mostly cleaning stuff. The boss tells him to haul dark ore that day, and he just goes along with it. Things take a turn when the merchant's son, Butch, and his goons show up. They knock over his cart and mock him for being useless with dark element magic. Butch is all smug because he just got accepted into some big deal magic academy and won't stop bragging. The Mick just has to eat the insults and keep going. Goblins, after all, are at the bottom of the food chain here. While doing his job, he remembers there's a map somewhere in the mansion. He checks it and realizes it's the year 125 in the Demon Continent calendar, the exact same timeline as in the game. He hopes all the game knowledge in his head might come in handy, though being a weak goblin makes it hard to be optimistic. Suddenly, all hell breaks loose. A group of heroes storms in, geared up in armor and weapons straight out of the game. It's the human army, and they've shown up way earlier than they were supposed to. Chaos erupts as they start slaughtering every goblin in sight, laughing like it's nothing, calling them worthless. He rushes to find Lily. She's in danger, and even Butch is panicking now. The heroes surround them, sneering and calling them animals for not running away. Desperate, he tells Lily to escape, but before he can do anything else, one of the heroes cuts him down instantly. As he lies there dying, he can't help but wonder if that's really how it ends. Then, out of nowhere, a glowing light appears and some divine voice speaks. It sounds disappointed in how things turned out, but decides to give him power, saying it's necessary to stop even worse things from happening. The guy couldn't believe what was happening and asked if that was all the power he was getting. The glowing presence told him he wasn't ready to handle everything yet. It had come to him bit by bit. Before fading away, it told him to wake up soon and take down the enemies waiting for him. Back in the chaos, the heroes had now turned their focus to Lily, ready to strike. But right before they could, the mech showed up alive. Everyone just stood there stunned, trying to figure out how he was still breathing. One of the knights lunged at him, but the mech had already activated something called Level 32, Dark Boost. In seconds, he wiped out their underlings like it was nothing. He locked eyes with the knight who had gone after Lily and demanded to know what the guy was really trying to do. The knight, shaking now, could only stammer and ask who he was. The MC, calm and cold, just said he was a goblin and then ended him right there. Word spread fast. Everyone in town heard that the hero squad had been taken out, and people were completely floored. The merchant, confused, kept asking who could have possibly done it. Butch, trying to stay relevant, proudly told his dad and the townspeople that he was the one who saved the day. The crowd didn't buy it at first, but Butch claimed he'd been secretly training in dark magic. The mech overheard the whole thing and rolled his eyes. He clearly wasn't about to let that slide. He walked up to Butch and straight up called him out for lying. Butch, offended, barked back and agreed to a duel, thinking he could still look cool. With way too much confidence, Butch fired off a spell. But the Mick didn't even flinch. A thick, dark energy started swirling around him while Butch kept running his mouth, saying that this was the same power he used against the heroes. Out of nowhere, a massive dragon made of dark magic appeared behind the MC. Butch froze. The dragon stared him down, demanding he tell the truth. Shaking and completely panicked, Butch finally admitted that he'd just hidden during the fight and hadn't saved anyone. The crowd wasn't happy. They realized they'd been played. They turned on Butch instantly. The MC, who had used level 35, Evil Eye, to drag the truth out, didn't bother sticking around for the drama. He walked away with Lily like none of it mattered. As they were leaving, a couple of Butch's former buddies came up and asked if he was really the one who defeated the heroes. The mech just gave a vague answer, saying the town's savior wasn't something he cared about. Deep in thought, he started piecing everything together. He might be stuck in a goblin's body, but with the power he now had, he wasn't planning to stay weak. He'd rise up no matter what and become the one who truly saves this world. Sitting quietly among the crumbled remains of a shattered building, the mech and Lily tried to catch their breath. She looked worn out, and noticing this, he gently asked her to come closer. Lily hesitated a bit, unsure what he was planning, but before she could ask more, he calmly cast a powerful dark spell, Dark Cured level 38. He figured that if this high-tier magic worked, it might heal her blindness. And just like that, it did. For the first time ever, Lily opened her eyes and could actually see. She was overwhelmed, staring at everything in awe. When she asked how it happened, he brushed it off, saying it had something to do with stuff that had happened recently. That vague answer didn't cut it for Lily, so he simplified it further, calling it an awakening of genius powers. She was still doubtful after all. They were just goblins, a race known for being weak and disposable. But for him, her being able to see was all that mattered. Lily, full of emotion, called him amazing, and it was the first time she looked at him with such admiration. Right after, a system screen popped up with an update. Quest complete, Awakening level 2. It said his dark magic skills had evolved, and something called a seed package was activated. He had no clue what that meant until a tiny fairy suddenly appeared. She introduced herself as a goblin fairy, saying she was assigned to help him. Still trying to process the fact that a literal fairy was now part of his life, the mech stood speechless. She told him her mission was to guide him to the hidden goblin village and hoped they'd get along. Soon, they were following her deep into the black woods. As they traveled, the mech couldn't help but think about how detailed and expansive this world was. The way races evolved, the open-ended systems, it all reminded him of how the game had impressed him. The fairy noticed him zoning out and poked at him with a sarcastic comment. He just brushed it off. Eventually, they arrived at the hidden goblin village, a place even his vast in-game knowledge hadn't revealed. The fairy teased him about it, saying, "Well, duh, it's hidden," and he sheepishly admitted he'd walked into that one. As they entered, a group of goblin kids gathered around Lily, drawn in by her beauty and curiosity. Lily hesitated at first, but with a nudge from her brother and reassurance from the fairy, she joined them, laughing and playing, enjoying a world she'd never been able to see before. The mech watched quietly, relieved and content. Meanwhile, he was summoned by the village chief, who spoke of a goddess's prophecy, one that foretold a goblin boy led by a fairy who would save the tribe. The chief believed the mech was that chosen one. When the chief handed him a scroll, both the mech and the fairy were stunned by what was written. It spelled out that the goblin race was nearing extinction, and everything now rested on the MC's shoulders. The villagers begged him for help, fully trusting the prophecy. Later, wandering alone through the jungle, the mech mulled it all over. Goblins were weak on their own, but dangerous in large numbers and could reproduce fast. Even so, they were dying out, and he couldn't ignore that. He opened his status screen and noticed that while many skills were still locked, his current powers were far beyond average. To test it out, he casually punched a tree. It crumbled to dust. Both Lily and the fairy were stunned. He kept testing more spells. Flare Bomb level 101, Barrier Magic, Healing Boost. It was like wielding a cheat code in real life. Standing there in the dense forest, the mech finally felt it. A real sense of purpose. Whatever came next, he was ready to face it head-on. They made their way to a quiet spot marked on the scroll, an old, hidden cemetery deep within the village. It was where the legendary goblins from the past had been laid to rest. The atmosphere felt heavy, like the place itself remembered battles long forgotten. Standing there, the mech decided to try one of the strongest spells he'd unlocked so far, Summon Goblin level 99. As the spell activated, the ground trembled slightly. From the shadows emerged powerful figures, each one radiating strength. There was a towering hobgoblin, a fierce-looking gob dragon, a sharp-eyed goblin girl, and a calm but intimidating goblin general. The fairy watched in awe as they appeared, clearly impressed. The mech explained that goblins this strong were extremely rare, even in the game world. These weren't your average grunts, they were the best of the best. The goblin general stepped forward, bowed slightly, and asked for orders. That moment hit differently. The mech realized he wasn't just a background character in some fantasy story anymore. He had real power, real followers, and real responsibility. Looking at the summoned warriors, he made a decision. He wasn't going to let the war between the so-called heroes and the demon lord keep destroying lives. He didn't care about which side claimed to be good or evil. His goal was clear: now make them both kneel. With fire in his eyes, he said it straight. He'd bring peace, but he'd do it his way. That day, he decided he wouldn't just be a strong goblin. He'd become the Goblin Messiah. In a strange, hazy dream, the mech found himself face to face with a glowing figure, the same divine light from before. Startled, he asked who she was. The figure smiled and introduced herself as the goddess of goblins. Her appearance wasn't what he expected, less divine, more like a gorgeous woman from some fantasy poster. He awkwardly admitted she looked familiar, remembering a painting he'd seen in the Goblin village. That confirmed it, she was their actual goddess. He was still surprised that even goblins had their own deity. Before he could think too hard about it, she caught on to his less than holy thoughts and called him out. Flustered, he tried to deny it, but she brushed it off just this once. She went on to explain that during their first encounter, things had been rushed. Now, though, it was time to reveal why she chose him. Across countless game runs, goblins had been wiped out again and again, never seen as anything but weak fodder. Tens of millions had suffered brutal ends, and no one had ever questioned it. But in her eyes, that very weakness made them powerful. The Mick didn't get it at first. How could being weak be a strength? That's when she explained inheritance reincarnation. Every goblin who'd fallen left behind a fragment of experience, pain, and memory. He was the one who had inherited it all. All their rage, knowledge, and strength had poured into him. And now he wasn't just meant to protect Lily. He carried the burden and the chance to rewrite everything for the goblin race. He woke up with those heavy thoughts swirling in his head. No more hiding. No more watching goblins suffer. He needed to act. That's when he came up with his next move: join the Academy of Dark Magic. It was more than just a school. It was run by cruel King Duel, one of the 7 greats of the Demon Lord army. Getting in meant getting close, and getting close meant having a shot at taking him down. Quietly, he filled out the application form, dead set on his goal. The Goblin Fairy looked skeptical but curious, asking if he was sure this would work. He smirked and told her to trust him. Lily would stay safe in the hidden village, and he'd go ahead alone for now. The story then shifted to Duel's territory. The academy stood tall, not far from the main castle town. While exploring the area, the Meek noticed something happening in the street: a goblin slave being beaten by a merchant. The man was cruel and loud, with onlookers too afraid to step in. The fairy's voice turned bitter as she pointed out how often weaker tribes were abused like this. The Meek recognized the merchant instantly. Bradley, a second-rate noble in the fantasy frontier game. Rich, nasty, and notorious for trading slaves and breaking deals, basically a walking pile of corruption. All those long nights studying character art and game lore were finally paying off. Looking at Bradley and the beaten goblin girl, the May clenched his fists. This wasn't just random cruelty, it was a chance. He turned to the fairy and told her he was going to step in. She didn't look surprised at all. She smirked, as if she knew he was going to say that. The guy started doing some kind of chant to call a goblin. He said something about being beyond life and calling out to the darkness or whatever, and then ended it by asking a goblin girl to show up. Right after that, a portal appeared, and out came this really pretty goblin girl. She stretched out and mentioned how good it felt to be back after being gone for ages. Then she looked at him and casually asked what he wanted, saying she was ready to help however she could. It was kind of odd how chill she was, considering she was supposed to be some ancient, powerful goblin. He quickly apologized for calling her out of the blue and asked her for a favor. While this was happening, some merchant nearby was still going off on a goblin slave, yelling about how useless she was and how much trouble she caused. That's when the guy walked over to him, grabbing the merchant's attention. Bradley gave him a smug look and asked what he wanted. The guy stayed calm and asked him to stop mistreating the girl. Bradley just laughed and said he could do whatever he wanted since she was his property. But the guy didn't back down. He said he'd pay anything to make it stop. That caught Bradley's interest, and he asked if he was being serious. The guy then threw out an offer. He'd pay 100 times what she originally cost. The merchant was taken aback by the MC's offer, saying that while the goblin might have been cheap, she still cost 30 gold coins. He asked if the mech was serious about paying 100 times that amount. The mech confidently confirmed, telling him he had the money ready, and asked the goblin girl to grab it. A moment later, she tossed a massive pile of gold coins at the merchant. The merchant counted and realized it was 3,000 gold coins, and still, he asked if the mech was sure. The mech assured him it was all his now and asked if they had a deal. The merchant, delighted with the windfall, agreed to the deal, adding that he wouldn't return the gold even if the mech regretted it later. He walked off with a smug grin, thinking he'd made a great business deal. The goblin slave, still shocked, asked why the meek had bought her. He told her he was a goblin too and just wanted to help. He reassured her that she was safe now and didn't need to worry. She remained doubtful, asking why he would spend so much on her. The meek just smiled and told her not to worry about it, mentioning that the gold wasn't actually his. Confused, the slave asked what he meant. It turned out that Bradley, the merchant, always kept a large stash of gold in his wagon for transactions. The Mick had figured this out from the game and had sent the goblin girl to sneak into the wagon before their conversation. She had stolen the gold from the safe, stuffed it into bags, and returned it to the merchant. The Mek justified it by saying that the gold had been earned through shady dealings and slavery, which shouldn't exist. He found it fitting that he had just told the merchant the coins belonged to him. The Mek then helped the goblin slave stand and asked the goblin girl to take her to a hidden village. He mentioned he was off to take the entrance exam for the Academy of Dark Magic. The scene shifted to the main gate of the Academy of Dark Magic, located in the Demon Continent, under the rule of cruel King Duel. The academy was known for training elite warriors, but anyone with exceptional abilities could get in, even low-level monsters. The Neek planned to join, rise to elite status, meet the academy's founder, and possibly take down one of the seven greats. As the Mick approached the school, he overheard a staff member telling applicants to line up for the entrance exam. As he prepared to join the line, a beautiful blonde girl approached him. She apologized and asked if he had anything to eat, preferably something sweet. The Mick checked his pocket and found a pouch with chocolates his sister Lily had made for him. Before he could say anything, the blonde girl grabbed the pouch and ate all the chocolates. She thanked him, explaining that she got hungry when stressed, and eating sweets helped her feel balanced by fixing her inner darkness deficiency. The MC's face darkened when he realized those chocolates were from Lily. Seeing his reaction, the blonde girl quickly apologized, not realizing how important they were. She promised to make it up to him and introduced herself as Letty. When she asked his name, the Mick froze, realizing he didn't have one. No matter how much he searched his memories from his past life, it was a blank. He felt a little embarrassed, worried that she might look down on him for being nameless like a low-class monster or a slave. To the MC's surprise, Letty didn't make fun of him. Instead, she excitedly told him she'd give him a name. She suggested Lime, thinking it suited him because of his greenish appearance. The Mick raised an eyebrow, skeptical about the name, but Letty was insistent, claiming it was a perfect fit. With a smile, she officially welcomed him as Lime. Just then, an announcement blared over the area, telling all examinees to head to the central plaza for the entrance exam. Letty, still upbeat, urged the Mick to do his best and said she'd be right there with him. However, in the crowd, a pompous boy sneered, muttering about what a lowly goblin was doing there. The scene shifted to the central plaza of the Academy of Dark Magic, where all the examinees had gathered to show off their magic. One by one, they stepped up and tried their best to hit the target, each demonstrating their skills and abilities. When it was Letty's turn, she went all out with her magic, leaving the crowd in awe. Whispers spread, and it didn't take long for people to realize she was the rumored princess of the evil elves tribe. The Mick watched her with curiosity, wondering if the rumors were true. He thought to himself that appearances could be misleading, especially when it came to demons, and debated whether he should change his perspective on her. Letty, full of confidence, turned to him with a big smile and asked how she did. The Mick complimented her, saying she did great and that she'd easily passed the exam. She beamed, thrilled by the praise, and happily asked if he really thought so. Their moment was interrupted when a cocky blonde vampire named Hag approached, sneering at the MC. He looked the Mick up and down, calling him incompetent. Both the Mick and Letty turned to him, confused about his hostility. Hag mocked the MC, asking if he was a servant from Butch's household, and made fun of him for even being there. He ridiculed the Mick for being a goblin with no darkness, questioning how he dared to even attempt the exam. Hag's followers joined in, laughing at the MC. The Mech ignored them, keeping his cool, but Letty wasn't having it. She stepped in, defending the Mech with a sharp retort. She confidently told Hag that yes, they were here for the exam, and what was wrong with that. She added that the Mech was much better than someone as rude as Hag. The Mech was surprised by her boldness, wondering where her confidence came from, especially since it seemed like she had no reason to back him up. Hag, unamused, warned them that their true selves would be exposed soon enough. Letty brushed him off, telling him to mind his own business. The Mick decided to focus on the exam and his own goals, trying to shake off the interaction. He figured he should give his best, but a part of him worried about the consequences. He knew if he wasn't careful, he might accidentally destroy the entire plaza. Standing in front of the target, he thought about how up until now, he'd only been using the power granted by the Goblin God. This time, he saw it as an opportunity to practice controlling his abilities and get better at using them. The examiner urged him to hurry, and without further hesitation, the Mech released his power. When his magic hit the target, the entire plaza fell silent, stunned by the sheer force of it. The Mech immediately regretted not controlling it better, realizing he had gone way overboard. Even Hag and his minions, who had been sneering at him before, were now in shock. Letty, too, looked amazed, calling his performance impressive, just as she had expected. Trying to downplay things, the Meek told Letty it was probably just a fluke. Later, Letty expressed concern about the upcoming written exam, admitting there was a subject she wasn't confident in. She asked the Meek how he thought he had done. The MC, remembering how the written exams in Fantasy Frontier were basically like solving game-related quizzes, felt confident he'd be fine. Their conversation was interrupted by Hag, who returned with a sneer. He dismissed the MC's magic performance as a fluke and warned him not to get too cocky. He insisted there was no way someone like him could use magic properly. The Manga calmly retorted, telling Hag to worry about himself instead of getting involved with others. Hag's smug expression faltered, and in a fit of rage he drew his sword. Before things could escalate, an announcement declared the start of the combat exam, and all the examinees were instructed to gather back at the plaza. Hag, frustrated, muttered that the mech had gotten lucky, but to remember this moment. The mech ignored him, focusing on the announcement. The examiner explained that the combat exam had changed. Instead of the usual one-on-one mock battles, they would now face a single target. This new format, implemented by Lord Duel, the Academy's founder, was meant to prepare students for surviving against stronger opponents. As the crowd murmured, speculating about what the single target could be, the gates of the plaza creaked open. A massive thunder dragon stepped out of the shadows, its presence dominating the area. The mech stared at it in disbelief. He immediately recognized the creature. It was the Thunder Dragon, a powerful area boss encountered near the end of the game. Knowing that this beast was now their target, the mech steeled himself for the challenge ahead. The Thunder Dragon was an overwhelming force, far too strong for the examinees, and the mech couldn't help but wonder why they were being forced to face such a monstrous opponent. Chaos erupted as candidates fled in panic, while the dragon unleashed a thunderous roar, knocking many of them out with its sheer power. Even Hag, usually so full of arrogance, stood frozen, his usual bravado completely shattered by the sight of the beast. But Letty, to everyone's surprise, remained calm and resolute. Determined to pass the exam and protect the kingdom, she bravely charged at the dragon. The mech stared at her in disbelief, unsure of what she thought she could do. Letty, undeterred, cast her wind-bind spell, trying to chain the dragon in place. When that didn't work, she followed up with a wind arrow attack, but the dragon easily shrugged off both. It turned its fiery gaze toward her and roared, making it clear she had failed. Letty, realizing her attacks were useless, started to fear the worst. This might be the end for her. Just as the dragon lunged at her, the mech appeared out of nowhere, summoning a massive shield barrier to protect her. He asked if she was okay, and when she confirmed she was, he assured her to wait, and that he would end the fight quickly. Letty looked at him in astonishment, wondering if he truly believed he was strong enough to defeat the dragon, and what he meant by quickly. Without wasting a moment, the mech launched his own attack, but the dragon, charging its horn with thunder, countered fiercely. As the energy shot toward them, the mech swiftly picked Letty up, evading the blast just in time. He muttered under his breath that things were getting tricky now that the dragon had entered its super armor state. Letty, glancing around, realized they were floating above the dragon in midair. She asked him if they were really flying, but before she could process his question, the mech tossed her onto a strange jelly-like goblin. The creature, a melter goblin jelly, was a rare and once extinct goblin species. It had a soft, non-conductive body that made it immune to electricity, but it was extremely vulnerable to dry environments. This species had vanished due to droughts in its natural habitat. Meanwhile, the Thunder Dragon continued to search for the mech on the ground below. The MC, using his dark magic Dark Boost level 54, charged at the dragon from above. The dragon noticed the incoming threat and fired a massive thunderbolt in defense. The mech dodged the bolt just in time and landed a powerful kick squarely on the dragon, sending it crashing into a nearby wall. Despite the impact, the beast quickly recovered, and the MC, still calm and focused, mused that the battle was becoming more interesting. He noted that if the dragon didn't start fighting seriously, it would lose badly. The dragon let out a deafening roar, summoning a massive thundercloud that swirled above the battlefield. In an instant, the mech seized Hag's sword, doing so without the spoiled brat even realizing it. With a swift motion, the mech coated the blade with elemental coating level 49, using the dragon's own thundercloud to charge the sword with its energy. Then, without hesitation, he unleashed a devastating attack, Dark Sword Thunderbolt. The sword, infused with the dragon's own power, struck the creature with a force that sent it reeling. The dragon, caught off guard by its own thunder, was fried by the electric shock, collapsing in a heap. As the dragon fell, a status screen popped up before the MC, announcing that the quest, Awakening Level 3, had been completed. This unlocked a range of new dark magic skills and revealed the acquisition of a new piece of equipment, the demonic sword Mjolnir. Up in the stands, one of the Academy's higher-ups watched the battle unfold, noting that the mech was an exception among the examinees. He acknowledged that this new student was someone to watch closely and resolved to report the incident to the dean. Meanwhile, the remaining examinees stared at the fallen dragon in stunned silence, unable to believe what had just happened. The MC, meanwhile, calmly concluded that the test was over. Several hours later, the results were revealed. Out of the original 8,349 examinees, only 2 had passed the exam, the mech and Letty. Letty beamed with pride at her success, attributing it to the MC's help. The MC, however, suggested that it was likely her courage in facing the dragon head-on that impressed the examiners. This made Letty even prouder. As she looked at the MC's name on the list, which read, "Unnamed Individual," she smiled and quickly rewrote it as Lime, the name she had given him. The scene shifted to the Academy's gallery, where the successful candidates were now receiving their student uniforms, grimoires, and robes. A teacher stepped forward and explained the dormitory system, noting that placement tests would determine where each student would live. The Mick wondered aloud what kind of test this would be. The examiner, clearly in love with a new piece of equipment, enthusiastically explained that it was a state-of-the-art magical construct from the Academy, designed to measure each student's level of darkness. He added that it was impossible to cheat the results and invited Letty to place her hand on the screen to begin the test. When Letty placed her hand on the screen, the results were immediate and shocking. Her knowledge, power, dark attitude, and inner darkness were all extraordinarily high. The examiner's eyes widened in disbelief as he reviewed the data. The MC, observing from the sidelines, noted her immense potential. He saw her inner darkness as a significant strength and realized that, with proper training, she could become an incredibly reliable fighter. Based on her impressive results, Letty was assigned to the Lucifer Dormitory, the highest-ranking dormitory at the Academy. Students in the background murmured in awe, recognizing the Lucifer dorm as the top tier. They remarked that Letty, being a rare evil elf, had naturally excelled due to her inherent strengths. Next, the examiner turned to Lime, instructing him to place his hand on the screen. Although the Mick already had an understanding of his own abilities due to his recent awakening, he was curious to see how much his powers had grown. As soon as he placed his hand on the screen, he poured all his darkness into the test. The machine began to tremble violently, and within moments, the examiner's face grew pale. The machine exploded with a loud bang, sending shockwaves through the room. The examiner stood in stunned silence, clearly shaken by the destruction of the device, which had cost a hefty 500 gold coins to acquire. The MC, sensing the tension, casually suggested that perhaps the machine had a fault. The examiner, visibly frustrated, dismissed the idea, insisting that the instrument was brand new and state-of-the-art. He lamented the loss of the device and voiced his concerns about how he would explain the incident to the dean. The MC, sensing the examiner's growing frustration, apologized for the mishap, but the examiner, still in shock, declared that because the Mick couldn't be measured, he would be assigned to the lowest-ranked dormitory. Letty, standing nearby, was visibly shocked by the examiner's decision. The Mick himself realized the problem. Being placed in the lowest dormitory would greatly hinder his ambitions, especially his goal of becoming an elite cadet and eventually meeting the Academy's founder, Cruel King Duel. As the Mick mulled over the situation, one of the Academy's higher-ups, who had been watching from a distance, made a note of the incident. After the placement ceremony, the Mick found himself in Seer Dorm, the lowest-ranked dormitory. Sitting alone, he felt the weight of his setback. He reminded himself that his ultimate goal was to rise through the Academy's ranks and earn a chance to meet Cruel King Duel. However, his placement in the lowest dormitory now seemed like a major obstacle to that objective. The Mick considered asking Letty for help, given her placement in the prestigious Lucifer dorm, but quickly dismissed the idea as impractical. As he sat in thought, something caught his eye, a piece of paper tucked beneath his grimoire. It was information about the magic tournament, exactly what he needed. The MC's determination reignited as he made his way to the receptionist's desk to apply for the tournament. The receptionist, intrigued by his sudden interest, asked if he intended to participate. The Mick confirmed that he did. The Magic Tournament, an annual event held by the Academy of Dark Magic, was a high-stakes competition to determine the strongest mage among the students. The victor would receive a magical treasure, a commemoration from the Academy's founder, Duel himself. For the MC, winning the tournament was an alternative path to achieving his goal. Even if he couldn't become a cadet, winning the tournament would guarantee him an audience with Duel. The receptionist cautioned the MC, noting that this was only his second day at the Academy, and that the tournament was notoriously dangerous. With no restrictions on the use of magic, it was a high-risk competition, and most students waited at least a year to prepare before entering. Despite her warning, the Mick remained resolute in his decision to participate. The receptionist, now concerned about the unusual nature of the situation, sought permission from her superior. Her senior, upon hearing about the incident with the destroyed measuring device, immediately recognized the Mick as the troublemaker and decided to allow him to enter the tournament without hesitation. When the receptionist returned, she informed the Mick that his application had been accepted. She reiterated the rules of the tournament, emphasizing that any incidents during the competition were at the participant's own risk. With his application confirmed, the Mick felt a renewed sense of purpose. The Magic Tournament had become his shortcut to gaining the power and influence he needed to confront Cruel King Duel.